Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. It's afternoon, isn't it? Oh, goodness. Okay. I have the beautiful Stefanie Shaughnessy here today, and let's see, I guess I closed your bio. Here we go. Now. All right. So welcome, Stefanie. I'm so glad you're here. Stefanie, I met Stefanie when I was at Atmana Intuitive Life Coaching Program. She was my coach. Absolutely love her. And she is a very intuitive, talented lady. She fell in love with a thing called Enneagram, and so we all got to experience Enneagram with Stefanie. Stefanie is a former law enforcement detective turned entrepreneur. She's a certified Enneagram coach and a 3-star diamond ambassador with Plexus Worldwide. She's married to a law enforcement officer, a very good looking one, I should say. And she resides in Jacksonville, Florida, with her husband, their 11-year-old son, and Oliver, their golden retriever. And so, Stefanie, yes, I love Stefanie. Stefanie, tell us about Enneagram. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I know, Georgia. I know you've heard me talk about it for, the last several years. The last couple of years, I've known you at least throughout Mana. First, I want to tell you, thank you for having me here. Thanks for when you think of the Enneagram, you think of me and you reach out. I would do anything and everything for you. So when you invited me on to do this, I was like, absolutely. You just name a day and I'm there. Probably, if I had to guess, I'm not so familiar with everyone in your group, but if I had to guess, I bet you might, this might sound like you too, because this was me, kind of going through my own spiritual journey, personal growth. When I left law enforcement 11 years ago, when my son was born, in an effort to stay home with him. And that's when I went into becoming a brand ambassador for Plexus. Anytime you do anything like that, even if it's not a traditional entrepreneurial type endeavor, when you are required to put yourself out there and put your name on something, I heard somebody say, it's like a light comes down out of the sky and everything that you're insecure about comes to the surface.
Totally agree.
So I was somebody who was trying to lead and live a very private life. I was never even on social media. I had a fake account I used for work, but I wasn't on social media until my son was born. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm from Michigan originally, and the majority of my family's still there. So I started a very close-knit, private, lockdown Facebook page to share my son with my family up there. And I was having gut issues, and my girlfriend introduced Plexus to me. So it was like the perfect storm. So this worked for me. My husband really encouraged me to do it. I started staying home, and everybody around me was telling me that I needed to really, a big part of my career, my business, needed to be working on myself. And so I just have that personality where I'm like, I will read all the books, I will watch all the videos, I will sign up for every training. Tell me what to do. So I was absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. And when I first came across the Enneagram throughout that first couple of years, it seemed kind of complicated to me. And just at first glance, I just set it down and I didn't really, dive into it too much. But I think it was just the diagram itself. I thought, I don't know what this is, doesn't make sense. Now I've taken lots of personality types, carry a badge and a gun. They got to make sure you're quasi-sane. So I've taken lots of personality assessments, psychology background stuff. I've done traditional ones like the Myers-Briggs. People often bring up the DISC to me. I'm not familiar with, I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with the DISC. But the Enneagram, it's been around, for years. It's very much an ancient typing, personality typing system that basically covers 9 personality archetypes, types 1 through 9. I will say, out of all the numbers, I know you and I were just joking because you originally typed as an 8, and then today you took my assessment and you came up as a 1. So we can talk more about that to help you narrow that down for which type you really are. But I'd like to say that there's no bad type, you guys. There's not one number that's better than the other or worse than the other. So I do want to say that. So I like to just start off too with saying, I do this like little Enneagram housekeeping before we dive into it, but I love to start off with what it's not, right? It's not something to be used to weaponize against people. It is certainly not meant to put you in a box. When I started my business, there was this book floating around, I don't remember who wrote it, called The Color Personality Test, which put you in a category between red, yellow, green, or blue. I always scored as a green because I'm an information person, and they're very analytical and logical thinkers, and I always typically scored as a green. People who are red are traditionally really good and assertive in business, and they're like your quintessential salespeople. Your blues are your social butterflies, and your yellows are your helpers. And in my industry, I work with a lot of women, and often I would hear things from women on my team that would say, well, I don't really care about making money. I'm a yellow personality. I just want to help my friends, and the first thing I'd say to them is, hey, we're not putting ourselves in boxes here. And there's nothing wrong with being here to make money on top of that. So I just want to say that with it, it's not meant to put you in a box. And also it's not meant to be something that is simply figured out by you taking an assessment.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Sorry.
That's okay. But I want to throw that out there. It's not meant to be something that is just, you go straight off of an assessment that you do too as well, unless it really resonates with you and you're like, yeah, this is absolutely me. That's how I felt when I decided, when I discovered that I was a 5, because the name of the 5 is investigator or observer. And I thought, well, heck, that's what I used to do for a living. And I would certainly describe my personality as such. And when I started diving into the 5, everything just made sense. But I want to say it doesn't happen that quickly for everybody, and that's okay. And it's truly up to you. This is a personal journey for you to discover your type. I've had people ask me, what type do you think I am? And I can't tell you, because the Enneagram is not about who you are, it's why you do the things you do. It's an unconscious motivation each of these 9 types have that is how they act, think, feel, and show up in the world, what they do that's motivated to keep them safe, and in a lot of times repeated patterns in life and things. So it's about our core motivation.
Yeah.
It's not just an overall description of your type. So I just wanted to say that it's not a BuzzFeed quiz. It's not, meant to weaponize or anything like that. It's your personal journey. And I'm just honored to give you guys some info on it and how it's helped me.
So excited. Cannot wait for them to receive this information. I loved it when you explained it to us in class. And and eventually she's going to give us some more information on it too. So if you haven't taken your quiz yet, please go back to the description of this and take the quiz so that you can come back and watch this and really understand where she's coming from when she starts talking about the numbers.
Yes. Yeah. And I always say with the quiz, you guys, or assessment, sometimes when you say quiz, people freak out and think it's right or wrong answers. Just go with your gut. Just go with the first instinct. Don't overthink it. And answer how you'd answer for yourself, right? Not like, well, my wife says I'm this, or my husband has told me that, you know what I mean? Like, just respond on your own from where you're at. So yeah. Hi, Kelly. So would you like me just to dive in and just do a broad overview of the types, Georgia?
Yeah, do that. And then you can explain to me why my type changed.
Yes. Well, so there's 9 types, 1 through 9. And I will, before I dive in, like specifically about the types themselves, I will say, if you aren't familiar with the Enneagram symbol itself, go and, just Google it, take a look at it. The word, the suffix ennea just simply means, in Greek means 9, and gram is just, illustration, picture, depiction of whatever. So that word together just means, a picture of 9 points, nine types. Out of those 9 types, the 9 is at the top, and then it goes 1 all the way around to 8, almost like a clock. The Enneagram is divided into something called 3 different triads. There's a gut triad, a heart triad, and a head triad. These are our body's centers of intelligence. Now, unless you're, an alien or something crazy, you don't have all 3, or maybe any of them. But as humans, we have all 3. But we tend to, according to whatever type we are very comfortable in the triad that we're in. So like myself, for example, being a 5, I'm in the head triad. So 9s, 8s, and 1s are in the gut triad. These are people who are very tend to be just straight shooters and, respond instinctively, just kind of go with their gut when they make decisions. 2s, 3s, and 4s are in the heart triad. And then 5s, 6s, and 7s are in the head triad. That is like the main way to break down the body centers of intelligence with each of them. There's also a core. Oh,
would you like me to, I've got a picture of it. Would you like me to share my screen for just a second, just so they can kind of see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That'd be helpful.
So is that big enough? Can you see that?
Oh, yes. There we go. Yep. That's perfect. So you guys can see the 9 up top, and then, 8, 9, and 1, that top triangle is the gut, and then 5, 6s, and 7s are in the head, and 2s, 3s, and 4s are the heart. Now there's a main emotion. There's a core emotion associated with each one of these. The gut triad, that core emotion is anger. With the heart triad, 2s, 3s, and 4s, it's shame. And for 5, 6s, and 7s for the head, it's fear. So there's a core emotion associated with each one as well. Now, the cool thing about the Enneagram, before I go through each type and just give you the 50,000 foot view of this, this is one of the things that I really loved about this, is that it absolutely gives you a path for growth. So, in the past, when I took things like the Myers-Briggs or, different other personality assessments, it would absolutely give you an overview of your personality, or maybe throw out a bunch of words that kind of described you. But the Enneagram definitely gives you a path for growth. It's like, now that I know all this information, now what, right? And that's one of the reasons I love it. And it's been such a great tool for me, especially when working with teams. This is also something, you guys, that has helped me in life. It's helped my marriage. It's helped just, with friendships I have, just understanding people of different types. It's basically like looking through 9 different lenses in the world, right? It just allows you to have more compassion for the person, understanding where they're coming from. So,
so do you want me to leave this up while you talk, or you want me to close it now?
You can leave it up. Since you've got the names are on it right there, I'll just go through with each one of the types.
Okay.
So I'll start with the gut triad, 8s, 9s, and 1s. And typically, and I guess just because it's like this, they're separated into triads. People usually describe the types by triad. 8s are challengers. This would probably be the only type that I would say, if I had met someone, that I could probably guess their type, because 8s take up a lot of energy in a room. 8s are very assertive. They are very blunt, straightforward, to the point type people. They can be extremely intense. And that's typically what they seek out in life, is intensity. They are usually, you'll see 8s as like CEO types. Entrepreneurs. They're very strong leaders, very outspoken. They are very much motivated by a need to be independent, not to show or display or have any vulnerability at all, and to protect the weak at all costs, to protect, who they perceive to be less as strong as them. So 8s would be the only personality type I could say, after meeting somebody, I bet he's an 8, or I bet she's an 8. 9s are peacemakers, and they're just what the word is. They're sweethearts, and they are your go along to get along friend. They are very much motivated by a need to keep the peace. They're very conflict avoidant people. They are very honest, very genuine, very warm, straightforward as well, being in the gut instinct, but just the go along to get along friend. Nines are, they have just such a sweet disposition. My son-in-law is a 9, my mother-in-law is a 9. I have a lot of 9s around me, and they're awesome people. Ones, traditionally they're called reformers. They're also called perfectionists. I love to follow a guy in the Enneagram world named Ian Cron, and he's kind of appropriated the name improvers. And I love that name for ones, because that's truly what they do. Ones walk into a room and immediately see everything that needs to be fixed or corrected or done better. They wake up every day with this game plan to fix things, to make the world a better place. I usually call ones my moral compass friends, because they are very motivated to do what is good and what is right, to be seen as somebody who is ethical, reliable, fair, just. You see a lot of ones in law enforcement. My husband's a 1. 2 of my best friends are ones. And these are people that I usually go to when I need advice on something and I'm a little deep. I'm trying to avoid having a knee-jerk reaction, so I will go and get their their opinion, because ones are going to tell you the right thing to do. 2s are your best friends, your BFFs. They are called, this is interesting. I've never heard them called provider before, but that's what they do. They're also called helpers, and they're called givers. And these are people, when I was talking about the color personality earlier, these would be your yellow personalities. They just want to help people. This is the person that's not only going to help you plan the party, they're going to show up before, help you set up, help you wash the dishes, stay after. This is the friend who's going to bring you soup when you're sick. They are the most externally focused relationally on the Enneagram, and they're very intuitive. 2s just have a natural knack of just this knowing of what other people need. So I love 2s. Yeah, they're great. I mean, and again, I want to say this, because sometimes when I talk about these types, the people in my life pop in my head, and so it's natural for me to say, oh, I love 2s and I love 1s, but there's no number that's better than the other. I just want to reiterate that. 3s are called achievers. They're also called performers. These are your people who are usually very, very successful. They're very driven. The core motivation of the 3 is to be seen as somebody who is valued and admired. They are very image conscious, and the goal for the 3 is to be successful, or at least be seen as somebody who's successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. 4s are idealists. They're also referred to as romantics. I like to call them the unicorns of the Enneagram. They're the most in touch with their emotions out of all of the other types. Which this is why I think is so funny about this too, because me being a 5, the 5s are the most detached emotionally of all the other types. So there's like this huge abyss between the 4 and the 5. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I get into the 5. But 4s are very, they are authentic, unique, very much motivated to be seen as people who are authentic, unique, special. They are oftentimes, I see a lot of 4s as musicians, as poets, artists, people that are very in touch, like I said, with their emotions and aren't afraid to express them. 5s, investigators, also called observers. These are the most emotionally detached, but I promise I'm not a robot. I'm way more comfortable in my head than my heart. And that's part of the work I'm doing on myself with the Enneagram. 5s are very much motivated by a need to be seen as someone who is competent and capable. I always said, and just joking around here, somebody could call me ugly or fat, but if you call me ignorant, I'm gonna flip a table. So 5s are very triggered when it comes to people, that's their core fear, is to be seen as incapable or incompetent. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, like, there's something called the deadly center, the passion of each number. I'll touch on that too.
Okay.
And for the 5, it, you know, everything that we do around that and this personality archetype that we fall under, it's just in an effort to keep us safe, you guys. You know, it's just in an effort to make us feel safe and to you know, especially with the people around us and the relationships that we're in. 6s are loyalists. They're also referred to as skeptics, or what is the other one? The what is that word? It just shot out of my head. 6s are worst case scenario people, worst case scenario thinkers, I should say. Devil's advocate. That's what I was trying to think of. Devil's advocate. These are the friends who are going to absolutely see, you know, danger down the road way before anybody else does, or even like a problem down the road way before anybody else does. They're quintessential team players, and they are, when you talk to 6s are down for the cause. They're down for the mission, whatever the mission is. I know I worked with a lot of 6s in law enforcement. I do a lot of nonprofit stuff here in Jacksonville too, and I know there's a lot of 6s I work with in that arena, because they're about the mission. They're kind of like the pillars of what keeps society together, you know. I would say probably a lot of first responders are 6s. They're in it to help, but they're tremendous problem solvers as well. 7s are enthusiasts, and these would be, going back to the color personality thing that I mentioned, these would be your blue social butterfly people. 7s are very much motivated by a need to feel satisfied and content, and not feel any type of painful or, you know, any type of pain at all, really. So these are people who focus on the silver lining in, you know, in almost every situation. They are master reframers. I have a girl on my team that is a 7, and I joke with her, because what I mean by reframing is they will flip the script. So, and that's what I tell her. She'll call me and she will have a legitimate reason to be upset about something, to be angry. I'm angry just listening to her explain it to me. And within a minute, she flips it around. And by the end of the phone, by the end of that minute, she's on the phone, she's praying for that person, and she realizes this was meant to be, that it happened this way, and they probably didn't mean it. And I have to pause her and say, you know, you're allowed to be upset, you know, you're allowed to go there, but it's just not natural for 7s to want to go there. So they're very future oriented thinkers. They're very fun, spontaneous, always, you know, like very much looking like what's new around the corner, you know, like what the grass is greener over here, you know, that's just their mindset. So yeah, so that is just a very fast, broad overview of all of them. And do you guys have any questions, or you want to talk about anything? I know this is a lot of information, so I don't want to just keep talking.
You have any questions, Kelly? Okay.
Good. Kelly, do you know what type you are?
I just really quickly did a quiz again, and it said I was a 2, but I thought I was more like I thought I was a 7.
Okay.
So maybe I
So
changed.
she moved as much as I did.
2s and 7s, you know, there are certain types that mistype a lot for each other, and 2s and 7s are, I feel like, are 2 people that do sometimes, because they're both very outgoing people. You know, their disposition is just, you know, very easygoing, and so I could see that. And before we get off the call, or, you know, after we wrap this up, I can definitely give you guys some resources if you want to dig deeper on, you know, which one doing the work in that. But Georgia, you have any questions, or you want me to keep going?
You can keep going. I'm gonna quit sharing here. That way they can see your pretty face instead of my computer.
Well, so let me say this. So with the Enneagram, and I really, depending on what type you are, I would go and I would Google what is the growth path for my type. So with the Enneagram, there are these things called arrows. So there's an arrow that goes to the type that you go to in growth. And there's also an arrow that goes to where you go to in stress. And it's 2 different numbers on the Enneagram. Now, I will say, even though you tend to go to the low side of a particular type in stress, like for myself, being a 5, when I'm stressed out, I go to the low side of a 7, which means I become kind of scattered, disconnected. I'm just like trying to focus on anything else but the problem probably right in front of me, and just have fun. And I'm like, it's just kind of that screw it, I'm gonna do what I want, I'm not going to deal with this issue. So, but I want you to know that ultimately, I think the challenge for each type is to go to the high side of the number that they stress to. Like, that's really considered the transcendent part of your growth, is to go to the high side of the number of your stress point. But in growth, I go to an 8. And I feel like I very much operated as an 8 in the majority of my life. In law enforcement, I had to be assertive. I had to make decisions. I had to be confident. And I could definitely have seen that, in my life. So you will go to a particular type in growth, and you'll go to a particular type in stress. Whatever type you are, you also have what's called wings. So me being a 5, I have a wing that's a 6, and I have a wing that's a 4. So think of wings of a bird. It's always the 2 numbers that you're right in between. Sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll say, well, I'm a 1 wing 7. And I'll say, no, you're either a wing 9 or a wing 2. But, so just, I like to just say that, like, think of wings of a bird. It's the one on either side. And think of these, I heard your wings described one time as somebody had said, like, think of this as like just salt and pepper that you add to your personality. We can pull resources from these types to help us every single day. And even in the ones that we go to in growth and stress, those are resources there to help us too. I mean, ultimately, we want to be all 9 types, you know what I mean? Another question that I get on that quite a bit is, well, could I have been a 2 in my 20s and today I'm an 8? Your type is your type is your type, because it's about the core motivation. So I always say to people, if you're really stuck and you're like, you know what, I don't know if I'm a 7 or a 2, then I would say, go Google the subtypes, what's called the subtypes of the 2 and the 7. Subtypes is one more layer to this. And all that is, you guys, is our instincts. Subtypes they're also referred to as instinctual variants. So you have a self-preservation subtype, you have a social subtype, and you have a one-to-one, or sometimes it's called bonding, or sometimes it's called a sexual subtype. And that has nothing to do with, sexual stuff. It's all about intimacy and bonding in relationships. So we have all 3. We possess all 3 instincts, just like the triad. We have the head, the heart, and the gut. We have all 3, but we're very comfortable in one subtype, which is usually how we respond to things. My husband and I are both self-preservation subtypes. And I think the easiest way to describe the subtypes to people is it's what you focus on. So think about this. We're all going to a huge party at somebody's house. Self-preservation people typically will think, how far is the drive? Who's driving? How are we going to get there? Is there food? Do I have to bring my own drinks? Will it be cold? Do I need a jacket? Like, think of safety, food, security, shelter, all the focal areas like that. I think of like the basic needs usually is the focus of the self-preservation subtype. My husband and I, being in law enforcement for so many years, I thought that was like a law enforcement thing because we're so safety focused. But we're both self-preservation subtypes. And fun fact, if you are in a relationship and your partner is the same subtype, typically you have less conflict because you respond and your instincts, you instinctually respond to things the same way. Not to say we don't have conflict in my house. We look at things very different. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit too, because this is super helpful in relationships. Social subtypes are people who want to know who's going to be at the party. Like the groups, they're all about community, the group, just hanging out with people, like getting their needs met by the people they're surrounded with. And one-to-one would probably be the person in the corner talking to one person all night long, who they forged a great friendship or maybe new relationship with, and they don't care that they've missed out on anything else in the party. That's the basic way for me to, lay out, just to give a very basic example of the subtypes. So I would generally say whatever subtype that you are, look at the other two. And that could be that's definitely part of the work for you in the Enneagram and trying to grow with it. When you read the subtypes of each type, they look very different, and some look kind of similar. But if you've ever known somebody who's like, say you have two friends and they're both type 9s, and you're like, there's no way these two people are the same type because they're two totally different people, they probably have a different subtype. My parents, for example, my mom and my stepdad are both 5s, as I am. Now, it made sense to me when my mom said I'm a 5, and I all of a sudden my whole childhood made sense to me. I'm like, that makes so much sense. But my stepdad kept taking the assessment. He took different other assessments too. And I asked my mom, I'm like, Mom, are you sitting right next to him when he's taking this and you're telling him what to say? And she's like, no, he's doing it. My mom is a self-preservation subtype, and my dad is a social subtype. So when I just have one younger brother, he's 2 years younger than me. When we were in high school in the 90s, and at that time, we actually went to a high school that my stepdad graduated from, and he lived in a small town outside of Detroit, and there was kind of like this rite of passage to jump off this bridge into a creek there. I had never had an interest to do it. Now, maybe that's, I'm female too. And of course, boys are way more advantageous or adventurous rather. But my brother loaded up his friends, and, my stepdad was high-fiving them, and because he jumped off the same bridge, and my mom was mortified and ticked that they were, that they had attempted or they had done this. So it just goes to show you, I walk into a place and I think safety, security, shelter, and social people, it's about the group, right? It's about, let's get all these kids together that are your best friends, and let's go do this thing, and it'll be so cool. So I just give you that example to say that's the different viewpoints of people. And that's why you can know people that are the same type, but two people, and they seem completely different. So I think the biggest takeaway is, on your journey to land on your type, go read the subtypes. Because there's 3 of each. So there's actually not 9 types on the Enneagram. If you think about it, there's 27 different hues of these types, of these personality archetypes, 9 main ones. But you have 3 subtypes, which really narrow it down. So if you had like a dartboard, I would say you've got your main type, right? Then you've got your triad, depending on what triad you're comfortable in. You've got your wings, and the very center, like the bullseye of your type, would be your subtype. Once people are really solid on that, it's very, you're way less likely to not be, to be confused about what your type is. So I would say that's my best piece of advice with narrowing that down.
All right, I'm gonna have to go do that. Go check those subsets out.
Read the subtypes of the 8 and read the subtypes of the 1. Now, this is a really good book for your people in your group who are really into the Enneagram. This one's called The Art of Typing, by Ginger Lapid Bogda. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, PhD. This book, it gives you an overall of each type, but what I love about this one is it gives you 3 questions. If you're stuck between 2 types, it gives you 3 questions. And so, like, for example, Georgia, you had typed as an 8, and today you typed as a 1. Normally, I would say to people, 8's in the gut triad. Well, 8s and 1s are both in the gut triad. So let's say you typed today as a 3. I would say, do you tend to make decisions from your gut instinctually, or is it more heart-based, right? Like if you were in the heart triad, but both your types are in the gut triad. So 1s are very motivated. Their core motivation is to be seen as somebody who does what's good, what's right, the moral compass. And 8s are very much to be independent, to protect the weak, and not to be vulnerable at all costs. So you've got those 2 things to consider. But these 3 questions that it gives you between a 1 and an 8 have to do with Question number 1 is micro or macro managing. When you manage or oversee a project, do you normally micromanage the activities from start to end and enjoy it? Or do you prefer to macro manage the big picture and the end results, preferring to leave the day-to-day details to others? That, and you don't have to answer if you don't want, but just
No,
some.
I'm trying to think though.
Yeah. So that's one question. Second question between 8s and 1s, how do you express your anger? Because for 8s, they are external about it. 8s have zero problem letting people know that they're angry, where 1s suppress it. So my husband, oftentimes he'll say, man, I just feel like I have this knot right here, like this angst. I would say for 1s, it feels like angst or also resentment, because not everybody is living up and doing what, pulling their fair share, you know what I mean? Because 1s are often the people doing everything and anything.
Yeah.
So I would think about your expression of anger to tell definitely if you're between an 8 or a 1. And the third one would be, how do you exert control? Because 8s and 1s both have control issues, right? 1s exert control by being highly self-controlled, right? And by trying to control the details of their specific environment. Doing so reduces their anxiety and their angst with, that's how 1s stay in control. I will tell my husband, you should delegate, and he will say things, well, if I want it done right, I need to do it myself. Like I gotta do it. 1s have this habit of just taking it all on, not because they, want to be martyrs and do it all, but it gives them that sense of control. Where 8s do not customarily exhibit much self-control, they're way more apt to go after exactly what they want when they want it. And I've known 8s in my life and no 8s today. I mean, Heather's an 8, and 8s will bulldoze over anything and everything to accomplish what they set out to do. Nobody will stop an 8, so.
Well, and see, when you describe it like that, I can see where I fit both sides, because every time I set my sights on a goal, I don't care what gets in the way, I'm getting that goal.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what obstacle comes or person gets in my way, I'm going to get there. But at the same time, if I need something done at the house, I'm going to do it myself, because it may never get done or it won't get done on my time schedule. So I'm kind of, I can see why I'm getting both now.
Yeah. Yeah, they're very similar. When I talked about the core emotion for each of the triads, like for 8s, 9s, and 1s, it's anger. 2s, 3s, and 4s, it's shame. And then 5s, 6s, and 7s, it's fear. One of those numbers externalizes that emotion. 8s externalize anger. Like I said, they don't have a problem being angry. 1s internalize it, and 9s are asleep to it. 9s are asleep to their own anger. And often a lot of the work that 9s have to do is, like when I work with 9s, I'll often ask them, what do you want? Because 9s are so naturally programmed to live their life on the agenda of others, right? Because they can be very people pleasing, or just go with the flow, right? Like they just don't naturally a lot of times express what they want to eat, where they want to go, what they want to do. So they're asleep to that. 2s, 3s, and 4s.
And with that, I guess I do more internalize the anger,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to make a scene. I might do it in private. Oh, I might let go in private, but I think as far as like releasing anger in public.
Can I give you a word to that? You
Yeah.
don't want to make a scene. Would that be because you think it's inappropriate?
No, it's more because I feel like if I let it go, I'm going to kill somebody.
Okay, I was just going to say,
or get fired one.
ones don't want to be seen as bad, corrupt. A lot has to do with like being viewed as inappropriate or, embarrassing or things like that. That's why I asked, because 8s don't care about any of that.
I'll have to go look at those subtypes.
Yes, read the subtypes of the 1 and the 8. That will help you narrow it down for sure. when it comes to shame with 2s, 3s, and 4s, like I said, 2s are the most externally focused. They wake up every day thinking about relationships. They wake up every day thinking about other people. So they're very external. 3s or 4s are very internal. You know, they probably have names for their emotions because they're so comfortable with them. And then 3s are kind of asleep to the feelings because they're such doers, you know. 3s tend to be workaholics out of any other. I'm probably next to 8, but 3s will stay busy for the sake of staying busy to avoid having to feel the feelings. And then 5s, 6s, and 7s, 5s internalize it. That's why I had gut issues. Just shoving all those problems down and just ignoring them. 6s externalize it, and 7s are, you know, kind of asleep to it, would rather not acknowledge the bad stuff. So yeah, does that make sense with you guys, like each of the core emotions? So yeah. The work is understanding that the Enneagram shows you who you are when you're in a healthy place, but it shows you where you're at, or who you are when you're unhealthy, and it shows you even where you're at when you're in like an average place. And I didn't pull my book out, Georgia, but that one book that we gave you all in Atmana by Ian Cron, The Road Back to You.
Yeah.
This is a book I recommend to everybody starting off wanting to get into the Enneagram, because his book specifically and very easily, it's a great primer for anybody wanting to learn more about this. His book lays it out. This is what you look like when you're healthy, when you're not healthy, and when you're in an average expression of your personality. And this is one of the things I thought was so cool about it, because when you understand this about your type, you can't unsee it. So I often use the example, like if you visualize going down the highway and you have those rumble strips when you get out of lane, and it's like, you know, you hit that and it's like you get right back on the path. That's what the Enneagram does once you understand it, because it shows you, you know, and I know when I'm not being the healthiest version of myself. And when I say healthy, I don't mean like drinking green juices and working out every day. I mean like the healthiest expression of my growth and my personality, you know. Yeah. So that's one of the things I loved about it. It's like once I saw it, you know, once I could really see that unhealthy version of me, I knew when I was going there. Now we're all human. I could be a very unhealthy version of Steph by 8 o'clock tonight, but I know that I'm not, you know. So I always tell people that that's the gift of it. I feel like is once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it very much helps you. And it just really, I don't know, I resonated with it so much once I started to understand it. And there's still so much I don't know about it. But once I started to understand it, it just became an amazing tool. And I know you work with so many healers in your community, and sometimes you land on something that it's maybe a tool, modality, whatever it is that really hits home with you. And you're like, oh, this is so useful. Yeah. And that's what this has been for me.
Well, and I'll share those 2 books too in the group, so that if they want to get those books and check it out, because I know that the road to you, back to you. Oh my gosh, that was so amazing. I mean, it's so informative too. And Kelly, you would love it to look that up, you know, see what all she's talking about, because you're going to be absolutely amazed.
Yeah, it's a great starter book. And and it happened to be, ironically, just by chance, one of the first books I read, which led me to his podcast. And I started really listening, you know, and just kind of absorbing a lot of this, and decided to go get certified as a coach 3 years ago, because I thought, you know, why not? I want to really be able to use this with my team. And it's really helped me. It's helped me in my marriage, like between and I'm also just recently, I'm in the middle of it now. I haven't had much time to work on it. It's kind of a learn as you go. It's work at your own pace type thing, but I'm going through another certification for couples in the Enneagram, because I work with predominantly, it just happens to be in my industry, it's mostly women, probably about 90% women, 85% women. And when we start doing, by the way, you know, work on my team and people that work with me in Plexus, I coach them through the Enneagram. That's what I do. And that's the tool that I use. And my team's very well versed with it. And in those conversations, they'll often say, I wonder what my husband is, or I wonder what my wife is. And that's kind of what I thought, maybe I need to get some certification under my belt with the spouses, having a partner or whatever, just to be able to give more to that in depth with the combination of the person that you are with,
Yeah. I could see that being very valuable for your team.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very much so. And my husband's a 1, I'm a 5. And I wish I would have, we've been together almost 20 years. And I wish I would have really had this knowledge back then in my 20s, because, my core fear is to be seen as somebody who's incompetent or incapable. Everything I just told you about a 1, and what would you say, Georgia? You're like, I just get stuff done. I just, my husband's one of those guys that does not sit around. He gets up, he's going to retire in 2 years. And I've been telling him, you're going to need to find a hobby, because you can only clean this house or do yard work so much.
Right.
But the moment that he would get up and start cleaning and start doing things, I pop right up, because I'm like, well, I don't want him to think I'm, lazy, or he married some lazy wife that doesn't want to help out and chip in. So I get going to work, and, and he could care less, but I'm looking at it like that,
Yeah.
And then there were times, ones have this way of talking sometimes that it can sound judgmental or condescending. And have you ever had anybody say that to you, Georgia? Okay.
Yes.
You're probably 1, Georgia.
Probably a 1. You're convincing me now.
You're probably 1. We got a storm rolling in here. It's getting dark, so I'm trying.
Oh, that's why I was getting dark. Yeah, but I've got some of the issues the Challenger does. But yeah, you're convincing me I'm a 1 now.
Yeah. Well, he would say things over the years, and I would go, that sounds so condescending. And he'd say, oh, he looked like I slapped him in the face. He's like, oh, wasn't trying to be condescending at all. But it was, it's their talk style sometimes. It's, just something he would say. So once I started learning this, I was like, oh, I get it. And it just allows you to kind of pause and just have more compassion for the person and just understand, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just throwing out examples of myself, you guys, just to show you how it really helps you interpersonally and intrapersonally, and with teams and, coworkers and things like that.
I love that, because, talking with people, I'm like you, I've done the different assessments, I've done the colors. They've even called them gemstones, rubies, diamonds, emeralds. I forgot what the other one was. Pearl. And the pearl was the calm, appeasing, people pleasing type personality. And I think the diamond was the hard go-getter, and then the sapphire was the person who liked to have the party, who wore the bright colors, who was always having fun, wanted to make life fun no matter what they did. And then I think the rubies were the analytical type. So when you're saying all this, I can kind of put those personalities in there too, with the numbers and all. But I've told you I'm doing other certificates too, and that's another thing they talk about in there, is really not so much taking somebody at face value when they're talking, especially when you're hearing a tone that maybe they don't intend. Because I do that. When I'm talking, I'll say something and people are going, why are you being so hateful? Or why do you have that tone? I'm like, or why are you being so loud? I'm like, I'm not, I'm just talking. What do you mean I'm being loud? What do you mean I got a tone? I don't have a tone. I'm just speaking.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yes. One last thing I'll touch on, and this is just a basic overview of this, is the deadly sin or the passion of each type. So when you hear the word passion, think of like crime of passion, like it's not a good thing. But it's definitely the source of your suffering. Whatever type you are, each of us individually, of the 9 types, there's a certain passion, and it's basically just something that we've used to, I think I mentioned it earlier, to help us feel safe and, get through life. And I forgot to mention in the beginning, there's so much research out there about personality. I mean, there's just tons of different stuff out there on personality, when it's formed, how it's formed. The majority of, I think, everyone in that area that's done all the research and read all the books and wrote all the books on it, I think unequivocally they tend to believe that your personality is largely formed between ages 4 and 7. And Ian Cron, who, we mentioned his book, and I told you he's somebody that I've learned so much from in this. I love the way he puts it very simply. He said, all of us as little people created a story for ourselves. And that story kept us safe. That story showed us how to basically, allowed us how we showed up in the world, how we interacted with the adults in the world. And that story typically, is your type. It is the type that you fall. It's the story of your type that you created for yourself, right? And it serves us for the most part as little people. And as we grow older, clinging on to certain truths about ourselves, perhaps can be a huge source of our suffering, right? And conflict and things like that. So I wanted to say that real fast because I love the way he puts it. So out of all of the 9 types, I'll just go through them real quick. For the one, the deadly sin, or passion, it's also called, is anger. For one's a lot, it comes up as resentment, right? Like I said earlier, I'm the only one pulling the fair share around here. Nobody else works as hard as I do. And so it's like this seething layer of resentment under there. For 2, it's pride. And this is a tricky one. 2s, and let me say this, let me pause and say this. Sometimes I've done workshops, or I'll, be in a room or a conversation with people talking about this. And if you hear something that kind of ruffles your feathers a little bit or triggers you, I encourage you to kind of lean into that and look at it, because the Enneagram does that. Because we're essentially talking about our shadow side, right? The ego defense mechanisms and the stuff that we do that allow us to habitually get stuck in these patterns that, just get us through life. And generally it's how we show up and how we act, think, and feel. And most of us do it just not even on a conscious level. So I want to say that because, I've had people stop me and go, I don't think I like what you're saying about 3s. It is not personal, I swear. But we're talking about the deadly sin of each type that keeps us stuck, the source of our suffering. 2s can be, without even meaning to, being very aware that they can be very manipulative. They have kind of a give to get thing. And the pride comes in with trying to manipulate you to let me meet your needs. So 2s can feel prideful about themselves because I'm the good friend. That's where that can come in and be unhealthy. For 3s, it's self-deceit. 3s grew up, all of us heard a childhood message at some point, whether outright or it was inferred. But the message that 3s got as kids was you are loved for what you do, not for who you are. That's why they're very image conscious. That's why they're achieving all the time. That's why they're performing. That's why. So the self-deceit with the 3s is take off the mask and show me who you really are, right? They're the only ones on the Enneagram that are referred to as chameleons, because they'll often tell you what you want to hear. And again, not even realizing it, but they want people to like them. They very much want to be admired. And so self-deceit for 3. For 4s, it's envy. And I think 4s kind of feel it in a way of they will look at others who they perceive to be unique, capable, and envy not having that for themselves. 5s is avarice, which is greed. And when I first read that, I was like, I'm not a greedy person. I'm like, that is not right. That's not right. Maybe I'm not a 5. But 5s are greedy with themselves, with their time. They can be hermits. They literally have this, I feel like this Energizer battery diagram over their head every day about how much energy is this going to take, right? They're all about energy expenditure.
Yeah.
So they can be greedy with themselves. And that's why they're also observers. And I heard someone say on a podcast one time, 5s, if they're not in a healthy place, will spend the majority of their life observing versus participating in their life. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, like to my heart. For 6s, it's fear. And I know they're in the fear triad. But I think for 6s, they really don't feel it or recognize it so much as fear. For 6s, it's anxiety. Constantly worrying about what if. I do this what if dance with people who are 6s on my team. Well, what if nobody joins me? What if nobody buys, this product? What if nobody shows up to this event? What if? 6s are on this mission to find certainty. They're constantly seeking certainty. And we know in life, there's nothing that's certain. So the goal, the mission for the 6 is to trust themselves and just know that everything's going to work out, no matter what the end result is, it's going to work out. 7s is gluttony. And it doesn't mean like, you're over like, the food bar at Applebee's or something and just stuff in your face. It means for the meaning behind it for a 7 is that they're constantly searching for inspiration and just wanting to plug into people to be inspired. And, 7s are people who want to seek out adventures and excitement, experiences, because they're constantly thinking forward and what's around the corner. And like I said, because they don't want to deal with anything negative. So it's like too much of a good thing is never a good thing for a 7, because as long as we keep good things coming, there's nothing bad, right? 8s is lust. And that comes in the form of intensity for 8s, right? 8s will get very bored very quickly. And so they're constantly searching for intensity. And for 9s, it's sloth. So when I mentioned earlier that 9s can very much ride out on the agendas of others, sloth just basically meaning like, they're being lazy at claiming their own life for themselves, because they're so focused on other people. That is a very basic, practical, explanation of each one of the deadly sins. But understanding that about when you know your type and understanding this is my vice when this comes up, knowing that, I don't know, it just kind of like that GPS system, it just course corrects if you can recognize that about yourself.
And so my big takeaway here today is that when you know the wings and you know the arrows and you know the subtypes and you know the vices, then you can know when you're going too far to one side or the other and can come back to the center.
For sure.
To help you from getting too far out of sync or too far
out of alignment.
Yeah. So that you can keep yourself more centered and more true to yourself. There we go. That's what I was trying to think of. Being more true to yourself, who you really are versus who you're pretending to be or who somebody else wants you to be, or staying out of your head and trying to worry about what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who said it first, but I've heard this, who were you before the world told you who you had to be, and if we all had the guts to be that person, I mean, think of what our world would look like today, but we really truly get stuck in what is everybody else going to think, or, living in accordance of others, whether it's our parents or friends, and not to say that we're not influenced and shouldn't be. But I think you guys know what I mean. Just, when it comes to accomplishing and becoming the highest version of yourself, for sure.
Wonderful. Well, Stephanie, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love this. This has been amazing.
Yes.
Kelly said, thank you so much, Stephanie in Georgia.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Kelly.
Thank
This
you.
has been absolutely amazing. I love this. I think my people are going to absolutely love this. And I'm going to put your information and those 2 books.
Mhm.
I'm gonna list those in here in case anybody wants to read them. And by the way, I suggest you read them because another one is very good. I'm sure the other one is even better. Stephanie, do you have anything coming up soon that you might like to talk about now?
Yeah, I'm myself and Heather Alice Shea, who is the owner and CEO of the Atmana Academy, where you attended, Georgia, obviously, just saying this for anybody watching afterwards. Heather is a longtime family friend, best friend of mine, and we are launching an Enneagram company in the springtime called Enneology. We've been doing local workshops here together in Jacksonville, but so yeah, so one thing that occurred to me, Georgia, is Heather and I have this really beautiful workbook that we use at our in our workshops, and it covers everything and then some. What I talked about today, it's got your arrows in here for each type, so it shows you. It has the subtypes for each
Oh,
type,
nice. Mhm.
and I'm going to send this to you, and you can post it in your group. Or email it to your people as a gift from me. This is something that I'm going to sell here shortly by the end of the year, just as a PDF that I'm going to put out there. But just, for your people, I would love for them to have it. I think, especially if, you're on this journey and you don't have all that much knowledge. I mean, this is probably one of the most simplest and just very clear cut, easy book to dive into, along with the others mentioned, to help you on your journey to figure out your type. So
And two very creative women created it, so it's got to be amazing.
thank you. We try. Thank you for having me. This has been
This has been so amazing. So, Stephanie, thank you so very much. And I will talk to you later, and I will share your information with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.